Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of Sit With It, a toolkit for having tough talks. During the first episode, we talked about the intersectionality of Latinx and whiteness, and how that translates into our local San Antonio community. In episode 2, we talked about the complex discussions that we expanded and we provided tips on having these conversations with your family, friends, and people of your own race. If you have not yet had the chance to check out these episodes, I would highly encourage you to do so, as the material presented will give you a full insight into many of the conversations we're going to continue having today. If you haven't had the chance yet, that's not a problem. Welcome. This episode is dedicated to the discussion centered around the Black professional experience. We'll discuss terms such as tokenism, implicit bias, and the glass ceiling, and how systemic white privilege and racism have corrupted the professional realm. Just a quick warning, there is some strong language and complex conversation ahead. On today's agenda, I'll start by making some quick introductions of myself. After that, we'll dive deep into the purpose of this episode and start defining some key terms. We'll get specific and talk about important topics like microaggressions and implicit bias in the professional realm. We'll talk to and hear from some special guests and watch some videos that will trail the conversation into white privilege and Black tokenism in the workspace. We'll wrap up the episode talking about reflections, calls to action, and I'll supply some references for you to research outside of this series. I hope you are excited for these discussions as much as I am. Now let's start with a little background about yours truly. Hello again, my name is Jake Ernie, pronouns he, him, his. I am a cisgendered white gay man that loves to cook, travel, and play with his pup Ramsey. I'm an alumni from the University of Texas at San Antonio. I majored in communication with a concentration in public relations, and I minored in business administration. I took a particular interest in studying these disciplines through anthropological, sociological, and intercultural lenses. I presented at a gamut of different conferences at the national, state, and local level on a spectrum of materials. If you'd like to contact me directly, you can send an email to developingculturaldialogue@gmail.com. We're here today to talk about topics that you might find uncomfortable or even taboo. We want to understand terms like implicit bias and tokenism. Then, we want to see how culture and bias have been woven into the professional world. Lastly, this is a great opportunity to reflect on yourself and figure out what you want to exactly do with all this information. Let's talk about microaggressions and implicit bias. Microaggressions are defined as brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults to marginalized individuals and groups. The micro in microaggression often refers to person-to-person interactions, while the macro refers to systemic behaviors that include social structures and institutions. Implicit bias are the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding and actions in an unconscious manner. These biases, which encompass favorable and unfavorable assessments, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. White privilege comes from the assumed unearned position at the center or the top of a system that white people are given in the United States and in other parts of the world, varying by location. Tokenism is the practice of making only a symbolic effort to do a particular thing, especially by recruiting only a small number of people from an underrepresented group in order to give the appearance of sexual or racial equality within a workforce. You have the token gay guy, the angry Black woman, the transgender person that's being tokenized within the workforce. These are all people who are being tokenized due to their face level or surface level attributes. Additional terms are crucial to keep in mind throughout the entire episode. To some, these words may look familiar, particularly for those who watched the first episode of this series. During the first episode, my friend Dr. Sobre mentioned these terms and defined them and discussed their importance. I've invited her back to this episode to define them once again. Take it away, Dr. Sobre.
A couple of additional important terms to recognize. Ethnocentrism is a term that means when you perceive your own culture and your own cultural perspectives as normal, and everybody who is different from you is therefore abnormal or subnormal. Your way of looking at things is the right way, and everybody who doesn't agree with you is in the wrong, and there's something wrong with them. That's ethnocentrism. Prejudice is important to understand because we all stereotype, all human beings put people and ideas into boxes. It's the way that we make sense of the world. And it's okay to do because everybody does it. It's just part of your natural perception processes. However, prejudice is when you assign an inaccurate and negative belief to support the superiority of your group over another group. All right? That's prejudice. You're prejudging in a negative way. Discrimination is when you act upon those prejudices. So the second you say, you look like this has negative connotations to me, therefore you can't stay here and you must go. If I say that, I am engaging in an act of discrimination. However, while anybody can be ethnocentric, prejudiced, or can discriminate, racism can only happen when the people in power are doing this against the people who aren't in power. So racial prejudice plus societal power equals racism. This is the systemic subordination of certain racial groups by those groups in power. Non-dominant racial or ethnic groups cannot be racist because, according to this definition, because they are not in positions of power in the system. They can be ethnocentric, they can be prejudiced, and they can discriminate, but they cannot actually be racist.
Why are these terms important? Well, firstly, they define and represent inequality within our everyday environments. And for me, that's a big reason for why they're important. Implicit behavior is something we need to train ourselves to understand and identify within our daily life. And understanding these foundational complexities are the catalyst for our very own reflection. And overall, my goal for our civilization and our society is I want it to be as inclusive and fair as possible. So these discussions, work towards that kind of future. This slide is here to remind us that everybody has bias and that it's okay. No one is immune from feelings of bias towards people who are different from them. Oftentimes, these biases are so subtle we really don't even realize we're experiencing them ourselves. Just because you have these biases doesn't make you a racist. These biases are often caused by systemic, system-based influences like the media, urban sociology and structure, and how or even where you were educated. Before we dive deeper into these conversations, I'd like to show you a video titled The Look. The film uses historical references and contemporary stories to highlight the bias experienced by Black individuals in the United States. The video helps build empathy, changes perspective, and opens the floor to these complex conversations. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. Here we go. Enjoy. The look provides us with amazing examples of several inequalities Black individuals and professionals must deal with on the daily. We saw prime examples of microaggressions, but how does this translate into the business world? We've talked about how microaggressions are these behavioral, verbal, or environmental indignities that are deeply sewn into the racist blanket that is our mainstream grand narrative culture. Examples of microaggressions in the business world include some of the following phrases you might have heard. Can I touch your hair? Wow, you're so articulate. You sound white. Your name is so unique. Can I call you something else instead? If you work harder, maybe you'll be here one day. These behaviors have a much deeper meaning because we know words have meaning. To talk a little bit more about this from a real-life experience, I'd like to introduce you to Taylor Waits and Camilla Factory. Taylor Waits is a lifestyle blogger, DJ, creative mind, and PhD student at the University of Pittsburgh. And Camilla Factory is an activist and leader for organizations like the Black Freedom Factory and the Change Rape Culture organization. Together, they talk about their experience with microaggressions in professional environments.
And on campus, you have to follow the language of institutionalization. You have to follow the messaging of the university, of the institution, in order to keep your job, in order to stay safe, in order to benefit from the resources. And so both of us working in offices on campus, official office, offices like, financial aid, things like that. Working in offices like that shows you a lot. The main reason, or one of the sparks as to why I ended up going into the field that I'm going into, and the reason why, or another slew of reasons as to why we started Change Rape Culture, is because I ended up quitting my job the summer before everything started rolling together, because they wrongfully fired a Black man. And that was so much damage control, in an office that had already experienced levels, years of microaggressions, years of undocumented discrimination, years of can you smile more, years of you look more aggressive, years of can you change your hairstyle, and then to finally have it all blow up in my face. It was a revealing moment for me because, number one, I had been complicit to the microaggressions as well. Obviously, I'm in a vulnerable position. I'm a Black woman student who needs the money, so I'm not going to argue with my boss or point out a microaggression. I'm just more so going to do my work within the system to kind of whisper to the other Black people, within the area, what is it that we can do to make this space better? But as we know, when we're working in institutions, when you're working in areas like where professionalism, politics are the key, where professional politics are really the norm of how we're judging people, as a Black person, you're automatically just going to start at the bottom. How you come into the office is already not professional. How you wear, how you dress, how you talk, how you speak is already not professional. And so I think that initial, learning kind of point, both being young, really young Black women, because that was the other thing, is that people never believed us because of our age, or the fact that we had not attained a undergraduate degree. And this is all just at an institution. Like, I'll leave the floor for Camilla to really go into like what it is to, outside of the academy, to be a professional, especially in the marketing world, especially in media. But coming specifically from like where we started working within the institution, working within a college, they're so blatant, the microaggressions, and they come back for you. Most definitely they come back for you. Everybody, similar to rape culture, everybody's a part of this system of discriminating against, of intentionally withholding resources from Black folks, including us, including me. And it took for that system to really blow up in my face for me to see a little bit more clearer what it is, what the scale of microaggressions can really do to Black people in the workplace. There is an article actually that explains exactly how Black people go to the hospital, how Black people have stress, how Black people's hair fall out because of the stress that they get from dealing with white people at work, dodging those hair questions and all these other sorts of things. So that's sort of like my first experience kind of coming into it, other than my yogurt shop job. But yeah, that's a little bit of the insight into like sort of from a university standpoint, how this professionalism, how this language of institutionalization can really like feed on a person.
To that, so when you're in undergrad, so I was a national debater when I was at UTSA, and I debated against Cornell, and I debated against UCLA, and I got to debate against colleges around the country. And Taylor's absolutely right. Being a Black debater in a world of white debate, simply just stating my resolution or stating my stance was a threat to white people. It was, I had an attitude, or I was defensive, or whatever the case might be, which is weird because debate is defensive, right? So that was like my initial experience with it. And growing up in a predominantly, I'm from Austin, Texas, so the population of white people is pretty up there. And growing up, I would, why isn't your hair straight? When I was little, I'd come home and cry to my mom at from recess. I'd be like, my hair's not straight like the other girls. They don't care about how colorful my berets are, my barrettes and my hair. And so I begged her, and with that, she permed my hair, and I went on this hair journey. And when I got to college, I cut it all off because I was like, there's so much anti-Blackness that has been put into me from kindergarten. And I grew out my afro. And so it's like this journey that you go on as a little Black girl, because you see this world of straight hair, of this example of Eurocentric beauty. And these comments really slither their way into social conversations. And so when I got into the world of professionalism after UTSA, I got my degree in political science with a minor in legal studies. And I started to be an activist here in San Antonio, and I started to have meetings with people. Those comments like, you're so pretty for a Black girl, or you speak really well. Like, wow, you speak well. Like, completely, averts the attention from what I'm talking about to the fact that I might speak well. And these kinds of microaggressions really slip through the cracks because they're like, so you didn't expect me to speak well, you didn't expect me to be quote unquote articulate. And while white folk and POC feel like these are compliments to people of color and to Black women, actually, specifically to Black women and to Black folk, it makes us hyper aware of our race, and it makes us question if our race was not beautiful enough to begin with. So it's just a really weird situation to be in. But even in the professional world, when I met with the district attorney a week or two ago, he asked me, he said, can you talk to me about questions that you have about the process of, jury duty and indictments and things like that? And I did. And then all for him to come around and say, you're arguing with me. And I was like, wait. wait. You opened up the floor. You said this was a safe space for me to communicate my concerns as an activist, via the fact that you're an elected official, you're a public servant. And you find it that my questions are argumentative. And so it really just ties back to this notion that Black women, we just take up space. For whatever reason, we take up space. People feel like we do. We don't. But they feel like we take up space. And regardless of if we're just chilling in our element, there's an attitude associated with it. Or there's this notion that we are uptight or that we are angrier than the rest. And I just want to highlight that even if we fucking are, we have the right to be, because we're constantly policed and we're constantly microaggressed in professional spaces that say, come on in and tell us what you think, and then say, ooh, you're a little too loud for me. So that's really just my experience with microaggressions. And Taylor, I just feel you. It follows you everywhere. And just as a Black woman, it's sad, but it's true. You have to just acclimate to that and just kind of navigate it. And what I do nowadays is I ask them the question back. So this white woman said in the store, hey, is your hair real? Found this to be a great question to ask me in the middle of the grocery store. Is your hair real? And I paused and I just felt like tense and I felt embarrassed. And I said, is your hair real? And so like asking somebody that question makes them go through the process of the question they asked. And they're like, and then they start to gaslight you and they're like, oh, wait, but if it is real, it's beautiful. And I'm like, touche, you as well. Thanks for asking that, ask the person behind you. So I think asking those questions in return is a great coping mechanism for myself, opposed to going off and giving Black labor to people who have ignorant questions. I just ask them their question back and I see how they perceive it.
We've moved from the conversation of microaggressions and into the world of implicit bias. As a reminder, the wild thing about implicit bias behaviors is right in the name, implicit. These are behaviors and thoughts of ours that are embedded into who we are that stem from various environmental factors. For many, a fair chunk of our implicit bias comes from our families and or the communities that raised us. However, we are still influenced by the media, our schooling, our country's infrastructure, in addition to a plethora of other variables. The point being, everybody has implicit bias, and although they can paint some ugly pictures, we always don't like what we hear around us, we can't blame ourselves for having these experiences. But as long as we're willing to accept the facts that we have these biases, are willing to reflect, and are open to learning, we can become very holistic individuals. Although we're talking a lot about implicit racial bias, there's many different biases out there. We have homophobic, sexist, weight, ageist, disability. The list really does go on, and it's important to keep up with what is out there and what biases we could have so we can reflect and become more holistic individuals at the end of the day. To learn more about implicit bias and how our brains influence the way we communicate, here's a short clip narrated by Dr. Brenda J. Allen. She's the author of Difference Matters, Communicating Social Identity.
Hey, what are you thinking about? No, really, what are you thinking about? In fact, how often do you even think about what you are thinking? Neuroscience tells us we have between 35 and 48 thoughts per minute, which translates to 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts per day. These thoughts guide our behaviors throughout the day, including choices about how we go to work, what we listen to on the radio, what are we going to have for lunch, who do we speak to on our way to lunch, etc. Perhaps what's most amazing is that these thoughts, as they guide our behaviors, do it without us even knowing it. In other words, we're often operating on cruise control. Sometimes that works out well. Other times, our thoughts can have negative and unintended consequences. And that's what we're going to spend the next few minutes exploring. Hi, I'm Dr. Brenda J. Allen, Professor of Communication and author of the book Difference Matters, Communicating Social Identity. As a professor of communication, looking at difference matters through my teaching, research, consultations, and engaging with others in a wide variety of contexts, I've been especially excited at the newer developments of looking at how our brains influence ways that we communicate. Implicit bias is a psychological term that refers to ways that our unconscious and automatic thoughts can influence our behaviors. Sometimes our unconscious thoughts are about other people. Now, we've been taught that some groups are superior and some are inferior, and those unconscious thoughts about those people can lead us to what I call thinking under the influence. When we are not aware that we're thinking under the influence, or TUI, we may make unfair decisions in favor of or against someone based only on their group identity because of stereotypes about their group. TUI, left unchecked, can inhibit including others, which can then deny us the richness that diversity brings to our lives. Research about implicit bias suggests that employers may be thinking under the influence when they look at resumes. For example, as they look at names, they may associate them with gender, race, nationality, and unconsciously make decisions for members of the dominant group and not for those for the non-dominant group. We can catch ourselves and others thinking under the influence by being mindful as we interact with others. We should pay attention to our thoughts and our feelings. We can be aware of when we realize that we've assumed something negative about somebody based on that person's identity. That's a sign of TUI. For example, I was once on a panel with a wheelchair user who has a hearing impairment. As she was presenting, she made several witty comments that had us all laughing. I realized that I was TUI because I assumed that she would have a gloom and doom attitude because of her disabilities. If we want to work and learn and live and play in places that are equitable, we must be aware of how we TUI. So let's keep the dialogue going about thinking under the influence.
To learn more about implicit bias, check out Dr. Allen's book, Difference Matters: Communicating Social Identity. On this slide, we ventured into the discussion of white privilege and how that has saturated the workspace. David Cotter is a sociologist that focuses on stratification and inequality, particularly rural poverty and work-related gender equality. The glass ceiling is a term that defines the gender or racial inequality in changes or advancements into higher positions and higher levels for white individuals. We see this when white-appearing individuals tend to quickly be promoted or move up their ranks or have some kind of privilege within their workspace or the professional hierarchy. This also feeds into the fact that only 3 years ago, white men accounted for 72% of corporate leadership at 16 of the Fortune 500 companies. But how can this be? Are there no black professionals suited for the jobs? Did not a single black professional want to be in the position and didn't submit their resume? I'll let you be the judge for your answers, but I think this would be a really great exercise and time to start and reflect on the systemic racism in our country. As a white-appearing individual, I will fully admit to experiencing white privilege myself. Am I proud of this reflection? Not really. Is it a primary example of systemic violence that, due to the color of my skin, I am inherently a part of? Absolutely. Am I mad at myself for the color of my skin? Not at all. Again, that's a variable I really have no control over. What I am furious at is the whiteness as a power and the horrible environments that it has created for some of the people I love most in my life. So how do we combat white privilege in the workspace? We can start by educating people and making diversity seminars and materials easily accessible and sometimes mandatory for employees. And secondly, you can start implementing anti-racist policies into a company's infrastructure. If appealing to basic human rights and decency isn't enough, and it most certainly should be, consider your company's liability to continue if you have a racist employee in your workspace. I don't think it was racist is never an appropriate defense, and we can say a statement like that now because we know and we understand the power of implicit bias and how blind it can make many of us. Finally, we've transitioned into the conversation of tokenism. To speak more about this phenomenon, I've invited Taylor and Camilla back to the stage to talk about their experience of being tokenized in the professional world.
When I was in undergrad, there were situations on campus, and Taylor can CC me on this, where, you know, there were white supremacist group going and hanging banners and doing things to stir up the Black community and things like that. And I remember vaguely, you know, being outspoken at the time, but nowhere near as I am now. I was like a sophomore in college, and you know, having these random meetings, right? These closed door meetings with the president at the time, President Amy, and, you know, seeing this big oak table and this ivory tower I've never been in, and him saying, you know, why don't you be a part of my inclusive equity council? And I'm like, ooh. And then I'm like, wait, what does that mean? You know, am I getting a scholarship? Am I getting, like, what is that? What's in it for me? And he's like, well, what you would do basically is you would tell me what's going on so that way I could better address racism on campus. And so what that meant, what that translates to is that basically I'm an informant. I'm here to go to these meetings with these Black people so he doesn't have to. And I am the one that's going to report back. So I'm going to be a rent-a-cop in a way, actually, for the Black community. And so I was just like, that don't sit right to me. And I didn't join it. And I certainly didn't join it for free because I was working part-time, and college is not, you know, cheap. And I just didn't understand how fitting 2 hours to a weekly schedule of meeting and reporting back on my community to this white man who already has a crazy salary would do anything for me. So I didn't take President Amy up on this. And then I started Change Rape Culture. And when I started Change Rape Culture at UTSA, you started to see all of these random, like, big ass wallpaper, like, portraits of different students. And they would be holding this feather. And UTSA was like, birds of a feather. Like, birds of a feather, diversity, first gen, oh my God, we're so different, San Antonio, Fiesta, and all this shit. And I was like, wait. Is this what accumulated from this equity inclusion council? And we have to pay attention to the way that these words really slither in to tokenism, because yes, UTSA is a predominantly, it's placed in a predominantly Hispanic city, right? Take UTSA out of the equation, put any other school in the equation, and you have universities that tokenize off of first generation students. And when I say tokenize, I mean they say, come here. There are people that look like you. There are people that study like you. We have all the festivities, the culture, and then they take your loans and they take your money, and they push your parents who don't speak English in their first language into these weird financial situations, because they know that immigrants are less likely to be financially literate. And so you have this system, right, of these immigrant families wanting the best for their children and getting wrapped up into this college lifestyle of, I need a loan to keep up with the fashion. I need a loan to go to class. I need a loan because if I don't go to my next semester of college, people are going to ask questions. And so it turns into this social constructive monster of a whirlwind of tokenism, because it's like you have universities that profit off of diversity, that profit off of inclusion, but they exploit their students. They have funding that fund tennis summits and shit like that, and these students are working 9 to 5s, maybe even failing their classes and all of the things just to keep up with this American dream that their parents came to America for, and that's for their kids to go to college. So tokenism is a really, really worked in system. It's a worked in system in a way that we all participate in and we don't get. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a Black woman. I'm going to college. I beat the statistic, but also I should have. Black people should go to college. Mexican people should go to college. POC should go to college. So it's just wild. And that was my experience with tokenism at the university level.
Mine is a similar story. I was at the same university, and I was actually the homecoming queen, which is like basically the biggest token you can kind of think of, which is basically not only an advocate, and I was an advocate and ambassador of the university in so many different other realms, both being in a sorority, as well as being president of organizations, as well as being a literal ambassador for the organization with Jake. And within each one of those, I kind of felt the same, which was like I was one of the few Black women who was in with it, whatever program that was. And with Miss UTSA, I was the third ever Black woman to be voted into that position. And I also won with a Black man as well. So I felt like that definitely like sparked the amount of like use they wanted to get out of us. And it was very much that, like just doing things on other people's behalf, and realizing afterwards that I really was just being used, or being told that I could or couldn't go places or do certain things, and me wondering why is that, and then figuring out months later it's because they wanted me to be in a certain place at a certain time, giving the certain sort of narrative. And it's been really the after effects, or the sort of like in effects, like I said, when you're continuously working through these crazy differences of socialization, is really that you just feel like terrible. You just kind of feel like you were consistently, as Camille and I were talking on the phone before this, replaceable. Somebody else can come in and do this job better. And I feel like continuously in those positions, I really took that to heart, because how I feel about it is if they don't want me here, they can fire me. Because I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. If I'm not out here, waving and saying hi to and kissing babies, I'm still going to be this monkey, this terrible person, this representative of the university who's ruined everything. So it's like, why not just nig it up? Why not just really go ham and just be ridiculous? And even then, I've just noticed that they like the tokenism is so, they're like, ugh, but we need her because we have no one else. You know what I mean? Even then, it starts to bite back on the people who created the system, because now you've got this token who's not going to do what you want to do. And especially when you have your hands in so many lanes, it's like, I may not be the token over here, but I'm the token over here. Y'all have so few Black people in every area that it's so often that the same Black person is your same token for everything that we have. We've got the one for sports, but they're also the one for diversity. They're also the one for the parties we have on campus. They're also the one for blah, blah, blah. Just like with these posters, you can tell they picked the same 6 people who are ethnically ambiguous to post on this flyer so that people think that the school is diverse when we all know that that's not true. And so tokenism is going to continue to happen even now at my larger university, the University of Pitt, that has a $3 billion endowment. They are still out here asking for Black people to do work for free. They are still out here asking for Black people to teach white people for free, to give our knowledge for free, stealing our ideas. You know, the institution is the institution, the system is the system. And that's the one thing you can rely on, is that it will work and it will always keep moving. And so it's like different, obviously a different type of institutionalization, a different type of tokenism, because just like Camilla said, we come from a university that was mostly Hispanic, that was actually federally filed as a Hispanic serving institution. And the school that I go to now is more than 85% white people. And so go to grad school and it's even less Black people there. And so it really is just me. Like it's a little bit different at UTSA. At least it's you and a couple other people and mostly brown folk. But now it's like, there's literally no other Black person in the room. I'm literally the one or the two. And every time you get into those positions, I always remind myself that I am not the ambassador of Black folk, that I'm not the ambassador of Black women, that I'm not the ambassador of Black queer people. And that we're all so different and have so many different opinions on things that all you're going to get is what Taylor has to say. These are my opinions. This is how I feel about it. And because I'm so strong-willed and hard-headed, I'm not changing my opinion. So now y'all have to deal with me and the repercussions that come with wanting Taylor as this, sort of thing. There's this fellowship that I actually was awarded, and everyone's been congratulating me on it. And the people were like, oh my gosh, what do you want to say about this? And I literally told them, this is a responsibility. This is a job that I don't get paid enough to do. This is not something that I want a pat on the back for. This is something that helps me to finally get groceries. This is not anything you should be proud of, nor anything that I should be proud of. $2,000 is chump fucking change. We barely get paid $25,000 a year. And y'all want they want you to have this big thing because they gave you an award amongst their systems that are already doing so much damage to you. Like, it's laughable that they really think that I'm supposed to get up and act like I care about something because they wanted to throw me their little change. $3 billion endowment, $3 billion. And they think that I'm supposed to, for 2,000, it's just not gonna happen. So I feel like tokenism is a place that you're gonna be put in, especially as a Black person, especially if you're a Black woman, regardless of if you wanna be there, if you're voted there and wanted to be there, or if you just pulled up to an institution, they're gonna place it there. The way that institutions work, they're allowed to take pictures of us because we signed for tuition. We're allowed to have pictures taken of us without our consent. They're allowed to use those pictures for marketing without our consent. They're allowed to make money off of our likeness without our consent, putting black men's faces, Black women's faces from athletics on jerseys, using the queer students, using queer and trans students on faces of flyers. There's not necessarily nothing that you can do to stop those things, but the only thing you can do is what you can do, which is to combat it and to revolt and to do something to try and combat those things that these people do. A way that we try to combat the tokenism that was being a rape survivor on UTSA's campus was to make our own statement. No, this is what we say, not what you said we said, or not what the statistics, just like Camilla said, these statistics are saying that survivors of sexual assault on UTSA think. We're going to let you know directly by throwing these pamphlets with our words on them in the bathroom so that you can read right now what Change Rape Culture has to say. And it's not that we're cool with this. It's not that we're ready to wait. It's not that we understand what Title IX is. It's that all of this needs to change and we're about to pull up. How about that? Like, y'all got 5 minutes. We got a day now. Y'all got a day, and then before shit starts popping. So tokenism is going to happen. People are going to want you, especially if you're a Black woman with amazing talents, even if you don't have any amazing talents. Literally the mediocrity of white normativity is the fact that you're Black, so you already qualify. And it is so irritating that we continuously are overshadowed and continuously undervalued because they just pick the shiniest turd of the bunch. Go to changerapeculture.org. Check out our resources. Check out the things that we've done. Check out our pictures. Leave us some money in our GoFundMe because we are consistently combating these microaggressions. We are consistently denouncing queenhood, the idea that there is a hierarchy of Black women, a hierarchy of Black folks, that there's a hierarchy amongst any of it. And if you're with that, if that's where your revolution is, if you're here for the justice and the freedom of all Black people, incarcerated, non-binary, mentally disabled, otherly abled Black folk, then we're with you. But if you're messed up on, and especially if you are not Black and you are not for the revolution of all Black people, you need to go ahead and get your politics correct. And if you aren't on the same page, we probably don't have a conversation. You can't tokenize me, or something that I love to say is you can't take what can't be taken. I am Black. I am who I am woman, I am strong, and there's nothing within me that can be taken and sold. Only commodified, only can it be stolen, only can it be a carbon copy. It'll never be the original. So whenever you're going through tokenism, really just understand, or for white folk listening to this, understand that you are a part of a lifestyle that will force you to tokenize any Black person, to mystify, to magicalize the Black people that are not only in your life, you know, your Black friend that is so great and comes in times of handy, the mystical Black person that you only rely on when you need help, but also those other Black people at work that you don't talk to, that have a cool stapler or that have funny things to say. Those are also the tokens of your life. When you say I have that one Black friend, or I have my work husband, or whoever, you're tokenizing them even when they're not there, not even a part of the conversation, and you've already let other people know that they're mine. I've owned their body. This is my one person, and I use this for this one thing. So watch how it is you talk about Black people. Make sure you talk about Black people with care, as if we're in the room, as if, you know, you cared about our feelings. Because the ideas of tokenism, it will definitely remove the humanity, the idea that Black people are humans, are full of emotion from us, and just see us as property, as a body, as a thing. But yeah.
You can find me, Kimia, on Instagram at Kimia, KIMIYA 2_DENISE. You can find me on Twitter at Kimia Denise as well. Kimia, another underscore Denise. You can find Black Freedom Factory at www.blackfreedomfactory.org. If not, there might be a directory. Things are changing. And then you can also find Black Freedom Factory, BLK Freedom Factory on Twitter, and Black Freedom Factory on Instagram, spelled out the whole way. Please follow us for updates. We're going to hold the city accountable, and we're going to expand to other cities. So let us know if you want us for your business, because we will give you honest feedback.
I stand. I love a Black woman. And to add on top of that, make sure that once again, you go to our website, changerapeculture.org. There you will find so many links. We have a campaign going on that is exclusively for non-Black folk to open their purse and give their money continuously every day, every second of the time that they have some, to Black trans folk today. And so we're raising $10,000. We're almost halfway for both of our campaigns, which is great. So if you can continue to give to those, that'd be amazing. If you want to give directly to Change Rape Culture, we're actually filing for our 501c3 this year. And if you want to congratulate us or give us some money, you can go ahead and go there. We have our link for our ongoing GoFundMe. You can donate to that as often and as many times as you like. We also have sessions every Sunday coming up next Sunday called Set Yourself Free Sunday, where we have free support groups for sexual assault survivors and their allies. And those are Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. CST. You can also go on our website and find us there. And then we're also having some amazing in-person events that Camilla just keeps throwing off in San Antonio. We have collectives that we are now a part of, artists that we are sponsoring, people that we are housing. The Change Rape Culture is a movement, baby, and it is not stopping. You can go to like I said, CHNGERPECLTRE, Change Rape Culture, on Instagram. And once again, give us a follow, give us a like. Please share our Open Your Purse campaign. We are trying to raise this money for these Black trans folks today. And thank you so much. Yes, if you want to find me, like I said, Tay Waits and TaylorWaits.com. Thank you. Yay!
Again, thank you, Camilla and Taylor, for your remarkable contribution to this episode and to the voices being heard across the nation. Your work is outstanding. We support all your efforts to combat racism and the fight for equality. Thank you to the San Antonio Public Library for your sponsorship and commitment to the cause, and a special thanks to all of you, the viewers, who tuned in for this remarkable series. For live discussions and Q&A sessions regarding the materials outlined in this series, please join us via Zoom the second week of August. To find more information like the dates and how to register, follow us on Facebook at Developing Cultural Dialogue. Additional resources are always available, and you can message us for any questions. Thank you again. Remember to reflect and stay safe.